Hi everyone, Answerny Question Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a letter from a fan, a query that I'm going to answer to the best of my ability, give my opinion, give my point of view on it. Here we go. And so. Hey Anthony, I was curious as to what your thoughts are on the issue of white rappers becoming more prominent in hip-hop. I'm sure you've heard of folks like Lord Jamar talking about the influx of white rappers up for Grammys this year, or Azealia Banks calling out Iggy Azalea for not using her music to address social issues. Do you think it matters if hip-hop continues to be a prominently black art form, or are the issues brought up by Jamar and Banks too reactionary? I apologize if this is badly worded or confusing. Thank you for your videos over the years. They've made me think a lot more about what I listen to and have opened my ears to all kinds of stuff over the last 4 years. Nick. Thanks, Nick. There's a lot to unpack here. White rappers, their success, Iggy Azalea, Azealia Banks, Lord Jamar, and the old school's perception of this new wave of hip-hop, whether it be black rappers or white rappers, whatever. So I'm going to try to approach each of these pieces of the puzzle individually and just tell you what I think about each and every one of them. And to start, white rappers, white artists, Caucasians. They have been relevant in the genre already for every full decade hip-hop has existed. And I don't really think there's any level of complaining that's going to change that. From the golden age in the 80s, you had the Beastie Boys, Third Base, Steinsky, as well as Rick Rubin, and Vanilla Ice. You've got the 90s, House of Pain, Ari the Rugged Man, who was actually recorded with Biggie. A$AP Rock got his start in the 90s, DJ Shadow, and to the 2000s, where there were even more prominent whites in the genre. Brother Ali, Sage Francis, you've got LP, who was coming up. Also the Streets from the UK, who was making great music that was gaining traction over here. No of Cunnin' Linguists, and also keep in mind that many of the artists from the past 2 decades of hip-hop were seeing continued success into the 2000s. And finally, you have to talk about Eminem. He sold over 150 million records. No rapper has sold more. So there have been successful and respected by fans and fellow artists, white hip-hop artists in hip-hop for the past several decades. So to hear this conversation cropping up now over a few Iggy Azaleas and Macklemore's seems kind of weird. And another reason I think it's kind of silly to center on these two artists when having this conversation is that it doesn't really take into account how relevant either of them are going to be in 2 to 3 years. I mean, I wish Iggy Azalea and Macklemore all the luck in the world. I wish them great success, but neither of them have shown to me that they have any real serious lasting power. They've both got some decent songs. They've both got some great viral singles, but do they have a career beyond that? Macklemore, I have a little more faith in, but I'm not sure. It's really too early to tell. But I get the concern. There are a lot of notable white rappers right now. Action Bronson and Riff Raff, MGK, Yellow Wolf, Mac Miller, Kate Tempest from the UK, and there are a lot more as well. But even their fates, to an extent, are up in the air. How relevant are any of these artists going to be in 2 to 3 years? I like some of these artists, but still, I wonder. And in my personal opinion, I don't really think any of them have more influence over hip-hop's predominant artist base, which is black. TDE, Danny Brown, Kanye West, Jay-Z, Madlib, Joey Badass, Chief Keef, The Roots, Freddie Gibbs, A$AP Mob, Odd Future, Big Crit, Rick Ross, Wiz Khalifa. I can't guarantee that there's always going to be more black artists than white artists in hip-hop, but over the years, despite the success and involvement of white artists, hip-hop continues to be the black art form that Lord Jamar says it is. And I will get into Lord Jamar in a second, but when he says this, he's not saying who can or can't participate in hip-hop. He's not saying white people aren't allowed. He's not saying they're not talented. He is simply stating a historical fact. Most career rappers are black, and that is also reflected when you look at the white to black ratio of the genre's most key foundational records. So if you're an aspiring rapper and you're also white, you have to go into the genre knowing and respecting that. That's all. Because we live in the United States, where for generations African Americans had suffered through slavery and then about 150 more years of systematic racism, which still is very much alive today. And a lot of hip-hop's most important records are born out of a frustration with that. Not all of them, but a great deal of them. And that's sort of the angle that Lord Jamar is coming at this conversation from. He's an old school rapper from New York, known for his membership in Brand Nubian, and he's now known more for his controversial Vlad TV interviews than he is his rhymes. And his interviews on Vlad TV are so controversial because there are a lot of younger hip-hop fans that don't necessarily identify with his ideology when it comes to the art form. He thinks hip-hop has certain limitations when it comes to cultural norms and the way it sounds, and has expressed some pretty strong opinions on race and sexual orientation, even the way a rapper should dress. And chances are, if you're a younger listener, hip-hop is maybe a very different thing for you than it was for him. He participated in the genre before it was the international powerhouse that it was today. In the 80s and 90s, I wouldn't call rap music obscure, but it definitely played closer to its cultural roots, and it was more localized. This was before the age of bling. But now hip-hop is huge. There are rap artists all over the world, rapping in a multitude of different languages. Hip-hop is now more of a general music style than it is specifically an expression of black culture. And now it could certainly still be that. But these days, if you are rhythmically rhyming a set of words over an instrumental of some sort, no matter who you are or where you're from or what you are rapping about, people will probably just recognize it instantly as being hip-hop music. But for people like Jamar, the message, the style, the sound, the culture, they're inseparable. And given the lyrical content of Brand Nubian's records and when he was participating in the genre, it's not really that hard to believe why he would feel that way. And it's fine for him to have those feelings, it's fine for other people to have other feelings, but as we debate and squabble, and I think, we should have this conversation, but as we are having it, the rest of the world is already making hip-hop music, but we're just kind of deaf to it because we see America as this mecca of hip-hop culture, which it is, which is why you have foreign artists looking over here for inspiration. People like Young Lean and Die Antwoord, Keith Ape with the song Iggy Azalea, which is pretty much a OG Mako ripoff. We also have CL's The Baddest Female. Look up that track if you haven't heard it. Foreign artists have been making hip-hop music for years, but I think the difference in this decade right now is that some of them are actually gaining traction over here, a little bit more than what people like the Streets were doing in the 2000s. And here is sort of where Iggy Azalea comes into the fold. So why is Iggy Azalea such a catalyst for this kind of conversation? Personally, I think it has more to do with authenticity than it does the color of her skin. And because Iggy has sort of shown herself to be inauthentic in a way, her skin kind of becomes a battleground for people to attack her on. Hip-hop is an authenticity-obsessed genre, which is not completely unique to this style of music. I mean, there are forms of rock music that are sort of the same, like punk rock as well as black metal. But in the case of hip-hop, fans really expect a lot of the time the stuff that rappers are saying to be true, in a sense. They expect songs to contain some kind of real personal experience, or at least a deeply held point of view. Hip-hop does use hyperbole and exaggeration as modes of expression as well, but truth definitely trumps those two things when it comes to what people value in a hip-hop song. And not that I think that Iggy's songs are loaded with any more lies or fabrications than any other rapper. I mean, just look at Rick Ross. But I think hip-hop fans get kind of irked when they see an artist who interviews and speaks in an Australian accent, and then when she goes to rap, she puts on what I've heard some people refer to as a black scent, which is kind of an unfair term because there are people of other races who talk with a similar twanged southern inflection. But I think what Iggy sort of fails to appreciate and acknowledge in her music is that She's rapping with an accent that is not her own, is not her natural accent. And for hip hop fans, accents say a lot about you. They communicate where you are from, the kind of community or neighborhood you might have grown up in, things that a rapper might wear like a badge of in his or her music. Iggy ignorantly and maybe unintentionally mocks that tradition by just putting on some other accent when she goes to record. And while there are rappers that do fabricate events, do tell lies in their songs, do just totally make things up, I guess the things that you make up, the things that you fabricate, can't be so egregious or obvious to us that we can't suspend disbelief. Plus, there's this really terrible old electropop song and music video she's got floating around YouTube from before she was rapping. In some ways, it's kind of clear that hip-hop wasn't necessarily her full-time thing, but kind of an elective she hopped onto. And then after this accent thing, her public image issues were only exacerbated by the really ungraceful way she handled people prodding her over social media to show some kind of concern for what was going on in Ferguson, Missouri last year. She came off sounding super conceited, super callous, and like she doesn't really care about the fate of those who continue to breathe life in the genre that she benefits from, hip-hop. And this is where Azealia Banks comes in, who is a New York rap artist. She dropped an album recently. I reviewed it. There were some decent tracks on there. And she has been very critical and vocal of Iggy's place in hip-hop over Twitter. And even though I think some of her criticisms hold water, some of the things she's brought up maybe needed to be said, it's kind of like when Trinidad James came to New York to say that Atlanta runs New York musically. Maybe there was a grain of truth to what he said, but wrong messenger. Between all the homophobic slurs, the anti-Semitism, the completely unprovoked attacks of everybody on Azealia Banks' Twitter page, she is every bit as much the garbage heap that she says that Iggy Azalea is. I don't really think she's that concerned about hip-hop addressing social issues, given that her music doesn't really address any social issues, and that she went at Lupe Fiasco, of all people, who is maybe one of the best conscious rappers of all time. Why you would go out of your way to shit on him when he has done more to raise awareness than you ever will, I don't know. Personally, I feel she will say anything for attention, kind of like the girl who ate a tampon while jamming her 212 single. And plus, you kind of have to consider that Azealia Banks is sort of a little bit in the middle of a beef with T.I. as well, too. And Iggy Azalea is T.I.'s paycheck at the end of the day, so maybe this is kind of another way of her to get at T.I. And I think there's a little bit of jealousy involved as well, because I think right now, Iggy Azalea is occupying the lane that Azealia Banks could have been in. She had a really hot single, but then her career stalled because of some mediocre tracks, a lot of social media drama, and the fact that she's burned bridges with numerous artists, even going after Pharrell and attacking him for the lack of success of a single that he worked on for her. Meanwhile, Pharrell's getting Grammys, and she's just getting angry. In my opinion, the only kind of rapper who would be concerned with Iggy's popularity is a trendy one, who only cares about appealing to the lowest common denominator, being famous, and not really making a deep emotional connection with their audience and having a long-term career. Iggy Azalea poses no serious threat to a Kendrick Lamar, or a Lupe Fiasco, or a Kanye West, or a Jay-Z. She doesn't make the kind of music that fans of those artists would even be interested in for a minute. Iggy Azalea has probably more crossover audience with Ariana Grande than she does any popular rapper out there today. Iggy appeals to more of a pop audience. And even though I like Macklemore, and he has years and years of music under his belt, he's put out hip-hop albums in the past, I think he kind of suffers from a similar issue right now. If that mainstream support isn't there for him on his next release, will he be able to fall back on the hip-hop community to support him? I'm not sure. I guess my point is, people like Iggy Azalea may be popular right now, she may be white, and she may be rapping, but the music she makes is not really of concern to the hip-hop community. She's more of a just straight pop artist at this point, which is fine. And I guess my advice to her is that Iggy, no matter what you feel about yourself as an artist, the hip-hop community, for the most part, doesn't really see you as a true blue hip-hop artist, and maybe it's just best to not concern yourself with that drama and instead just focus on entertaining and keeping happy the multitude of fans you've been able to amass so far. And if you're upset that someone like Iggy Azalea can come along and get popular off of rap music, I'm not really sure if there's anything you can do about it. That was a Pandora's box that was opened long ago by things like the rise of pop rap in the late 90s and the 2000s. And there are pros and there are cons to that. The pro is that the hip-hop listener base is gigantic, but there are varying degrees of how invested in hip-hop as a genre some of these people are. You have more hip-hop listeners today that are more familiar with Kanye West than they are A Tribe Called Quest. So of course, when you have a genre whose current-day figures are more popular than its forefathers, the current-day culture is going to be different than the culture the genre started out in. Styles of music go through a lot of change and evolution sonically and ideologically over decades of time. And personally, I don't subscribe to the idea that all forms of cultural appropriation are horrible. I could take that mindset as far as to say, I'm going to avoid any white rock artists because all rock music is rooted in blues and rhythm and blues, so I'd be chucking out my punk records, my metal records, my indie records. Think of all the fantastic and amazing, influential pieces of music I would have to avoid. Seems kind of ridiculous and short-sighted to say that people of one culture can't participate in or enjoy the art form of another culture, when the mere fact that someone in Korea might want to make hip-hop music is a reflection of the power of music, its ability to transcend cultural boundaries and influence and inspire people who might be completely unfamiliar with the culture the music was born in. And while I sympathize with Lord Jamar's wishes to try to maintain hip-hop culture, I don't see how revoking the opinion privileges of white artists and maybe even white fans will end in the results that he wants. Because as he has pointed out in other Vlad TV interviews, there are black artists who he is very unhappy with as well because he thinks they are doing the genre and doing the culture a disservice. And I don't think the Macklemore song Same Love is really even an opinion or a comment on hip-hop culture at all. It's just a general statement on homophobia in Western culture. He may be making a hip-hop song to express that, but he is not alone in expressing these sentiments. Artists like Kanye West and even Jadakiss have also said they don't really hold any animosity toward homosexuals. Prodigy of Mobb Deep as well in his own autobiography. And while yeah, it kind of sucks that hip-hop is just taken as entertainment these days, not really just a platform to address social issues, the entertainment side of hip-hop and the socially aware side of hip-hop have coexisted for years, dating back to the 70s with the Sugar Hill Gang, moving forward to Curtis Blow, Fat Boys, 2 Live Crew, while serious political hip-hop that is in tune with its cultural roots is great. There's always been a great deal of rap music that doesn't take itself too seriously either. In closing, being a hip-hop fan myself and talking with hundreds more over the years, people who I know that this is one of their favorite genres, they grew up on this stuff, I've found most of them to be more concerned with lyrical content, skill level when it comes to rapping, production, and whether or not you're being true to yourself as a person than they are the skin color of the artist. And again, who cares if Iggy Azalea is hot right now? Anybody concerned with that is not thinking of the long term. This is nothing against her, but are we gonna look back 30 years and think of the song Fancy as a high point for music? No. It's bubblegum, which is fine. Every generation needs entertainment, but eventually we spit that bubblegum out. Transition. What do you think of all this? Let me know. Forever.